Hello, and welcome to Noonday Meditation and Contemplative Prayer Power Hour. My
Mhm.
name is Martin Coward, and we gather here every day at noon, Monday through Saturday at noon, to love and support each other through this pandemic. And I'm so excited today to have my guest, Oleg Lougheed. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Lougheed, close enough.
Loki, right? All right. Well, thank you. That's the way you say it in South Georgia.
There you go.
Um, and I'm going to let him tell you his story, introduce him. He's got a wonderful story of transformation, and I want him. He's going to be sharing with us what he's learning about shifting his perception of COVID-19 from being an obstacle or a challenge or something we should be afraid of to an opportunity to learn and how we can grow from that. So I'm really excited to have him with us today. I know y'all get tired of hearing me, and then what we'll do is we'll have a conversation with Oleg, and then we'll have our meditation, and that will be today's broadcast. Okay, so Oleg, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you and let you start to share.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for not only having me on your platform, but even having this space to begin with. I think there's a lot to be said between creating spaces like this, which, in my opinion, you don't encounter, or many of us don't encounter every day. I always make a joke about going to a grocery store or Starbucks or some of these other places. And I mean, how often are you going to have a chance to talk about your life and what really happens in it? And so when I look at my story and the different challenges and adversities that I have faced, what I realized over time was that so much of my life has become about learning to embrace all of those challenges and obstacles as something that's just going to be part of the journey. And not only in the previous chapters, but something that is going to be there each and every single step of the way. So when I shifted my perspective around choosing to look at adversity as something that is there to actually help me, something that is there to help me develop a different perspective or different opportunities, rather than hinder me from achieving some of those things that I envisioned, my life changed. And what I mean by that is a couple of years ago, I remember looking at some of the challenges that I was presented with, and a little backstory on that is that the challenges for me were very evident from the time of my birth. And that is being born in a foreign country, living with a group of parents or a parent who was an alcoholic at the time. My father was in prison, and my sister, who was 18 years older, actually ended up becoming my legal guardian at the time. So when you think about challenges, those are at least three relatively big ones that I had to find tools to work with over time. What I realized over time, and what those particular circumstances have taught me, is that it is in my best advantage to try and understand how to deal with these adversities. Because here's the thing, at least here's what I've learned throughout my experience thus far. In my opinion, adversity is not going to stop. I think it's always going to be there. And so when I shifted that perspective and understanding that instead of trying to eliminate adversity out of my life, why don't I try and embrace it? And so the question that you and I put together that people are able to see at the bottom of this, and that is, what is COVID-19 here to teach us? What am I here to learn? Those are the questions that really help me go into some of these challenging circumstances and reframe them from what they appear to be. And that is something that's there to stop you, something that's there to kind of impede your progress, but rather something that's there to actually help you look at life through a different lens. So I believe in this. I believe in this space. I believe in opportunities to hear other people's stories, because I believe it is through those shared perspectives I'm able to shift my own perspective as well when it comes to that world.
Only what I like to do when people pop in, like Rohit did, is just stop for a second and say, "Hello, Rohit. Thank you for joining us." Because I want to make it as engaging as possible. And Rohit he's got an interesting story to tell too, but we're going to hear your story today. But I'm really glad you're here, Rohit, and thank you for joining us today.
That's amazing. Yeah, thank you, Rohit, for joining our conversation, and would love to hear your perspectives and anything else that comes to your mind as you get to hear both of our stories.
So you were telling your story about how your challenges and your adversities, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. For me to kind of continue on that thread, what I've realized that also makes a big difference in my life when it comes to some of these challenges that I experience is also choosing to connect with others of similar paths, similar journeys. So that way I can hear their own perspectives and their own ways of dealing with those challenging circumstances. And so 3 years ago, I remember when I started this organization of Overcoming Odds, and something that you and I and Scott Mason have been able to be a part of. What I realized was that in even the name itself, that's what my life has been at the end of the day. And it is really just finding ways to overcome some of the challenges. But overcome, once again, not to eliminate, but more so embrace all those things for what they are. And know that each and every single one of the events has a lesson that it can teach us. It has something that we can learn and take away from it. And in naming that organization, Overcoming Odds, what I've realized was that for me, it was actually a daily reminder of the past. It's a daily reminder of what I can do with that past and how I can look at it through a completely different lens in order to help me move forward in the present and in the future. So I hope that adds value to some.
Yeah, I want to share something with you that happened for me this morning. Is after our conversation yesterday of putting together what we were going to talk about today and doing a short write up, it made me think about my coaching practice, and what I'm really focusing on is helping people embrace their imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. Because I can tell my personal story is one where I was really gripped and terrorized by money and success, largely from the loud voice of my imposter syndrome. And so when we were talking last night, it made me think, well, how do I bring this into the world, this idea? I mean, I had the idea, but it really helped me to focus on what is in the teaching. And I'm just going to name my course. I'm putting together a course, a 21-day challenge on what does your imposter syndrome what are you learning from your imposter syndrome? Mm-hmm. And what I would say when we face those things that we think we find, maybe it's a depression, maybe it's the imposter syndrome, maybe it's some egoic story that we feel stuck inside and often a victim to. And so, but when we do what you're suggesting, when we begin to question that and we begin to look at it and say, what are you here to teach me? What am I here to learn from you? What I would say is all of a sudden it begins to become an opportunity of growth and learning. And for me, my imposter syndrome actually dissolved and turned into an incredible servant. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because now I've aligned my heart, my mind, and my soul for a common purpose to help other people face their challenges, in this particular case, imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to thank you for kind of helping me kind of formulate and articulate this in a way that I think has a lot of meaning to people, because I know there's a lot of people, particularly right now in COVID-19, who are feeling lost and afraid because who they thought they were in their careers and in their jobs and whatever they were doing, they're not able to do that. That imposter syndrome can get very loud, saying, "See, I told you you were a fraud. I told you weren't any good." Mm-hmm. And so, if we can say, "Well, what are you trying to tell me? Maybe that wasn't the job for me in the first place. Mm-hmm. Maybe that wasn't who I am. What do I have to learn from you? Maybe I'm learning. Oh, I'll take it back. It's not that I'm not good enough. I might have been in the wrong role." Mm-hmm. At least that was my case. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there's a lot to be learned right now in what you're teaching us, and what you're learning for yourself is that to stop what you're doing during COVID-19 and not run from the imposter syndrome, not argue and get into a debate with it, but
Mm-hmm.
really to go into more of an inquiry and look for the truth. What are you teaching me? What is really true? You know,
Mm-hmm.
is it really true that I'm a worthless fraud and don't know what I'm doing? What is really true here?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the truth for me is that I really wasn't. I was in a role as a financial planner and wealth manager, but my role models were not financial planners and wealth managers. My role models were always coaches and teachers. So what I learned from my imposter syndrome was not that I wasn't good enough and I was a bad person, but I learned that I discovered my more authentic self. My role in the world is to be a coach and a teacher. And by doing that, doing what you're talking about, all of a sudden that imposter syndrome became my biggest ally, became my most loyal servant. It's sort of like aligning our heart and our mind and our soul so that we're all working from that creative love energy we all have within ourselves, our more authentic self.
Mm-hmm. I think there are a couple of things within that you said that's worthwhile mentioning again. The first one is this concept of choosing to question things for what they appear to be. I know when I first stepped into that space and I started to question my quote unquote outside reality and some of the things that I was surrounded with, one of them being definition of success. Oftentimes when I looked at images that were presented by other people as far as what success looked like, and that is having X amount of dollars, having the type of car, having a type of house, what I realized was that I was falling into a trap, because all the actions and all the things I was choosing to do were in alignment with that. When over time, what made sense to me was that it may bring me certain elements of happiness, but that's not it. That's not the end of the road.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to success in particular, what I've learned is, in my opinion, it's important for you to identify, what does success mean to you? To me, success could be a completely different thing. To me, success could be just living where I'm at right now with no reason to change some of the things that someone else might be wanting me to do. So I think in my opinion, everything boils down to our own individual journeys that we choose to take, and questioning on your own and understanding that whatever's surrounding you does not have to be your reality. It's just one opinion of what success looks like. It's just one possibility of what someone else's reality is. And the other thing that you mentioned that's also important and interesting to note is this. When you talk about the imposter syndrome, for example, specifically, and the different messages that you might receive along the way, and I would be lying to you if I did not receive those messages.
We all do, you know.
We all do.
It's a popular topic. We all
Mhm.
have that egoic voice in our head that tells us it's never enough and we're never going to make it. We're never going to whatever.
Yeah, it's always there, and I think it's, in my opinion, it's always there, even when you work through certain elements of it. Because as a friend of mine had said a couple months ago, maybe to a year ago, she said, life is like an onion. And that means every single subject is like an onion. Same thing with imposter syndrome. As soon as you get through one layer, know that there's going to be another layer you can add.
I was talking earlier this week that as I have transitioned into being a prosperity coach and teacher, spiritual teacher, now my imposter syndrome is saying things like, who are you to be a prosperity coach? You know, you're
Yeah.
not Oprah Winfrey. You're not Lisa Nichols. Who are you to be teaching spiritual principles? You're not Eckhart Tolle, you know, and it's like, no, you're right. I'm not any of those people. But what I learned from those role models of mine is they didn't get to be where they got by being somebody else. They got there by being themselves.
Yeah.
So so in that dialogue, let's call it a dialogue, that I had with my imposter syndrome, who showed up to teach me something just this week.
Yeah.
I learned that, no, you're right. You're right about one thing. I'm not those people, but I am uniquely me, showing up in that role, and it's very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, that part of me that was got behind me and began to support me in my journey.
Yeah. And that's where I think this concept of competition also redefines itself. So the journey becomes a lot more about everyone is following their own path, and no one is there to take away your resources or your candy, so to speak, but they're each on their own individual journeys.
Right.
And so at least my experience has been, before I confronted some of those phrases, such as not necessarily I'm not good enough. I don't know if I probably did have that, but it wasn't as evident. I think for me, one of the stronger ones was, am I worthy of success?
Right.
And so there was that fear of what is going to happen if you actually achieve the level of success that you envision in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized was that in confronting that question to begin with, it helped me, it simplified life in a way. It made it to a point where I was able to understand that whatever my journey is completely unique to who I am.
Right.
I'm not there to compete
Right.
with Mark. I'm not there to compete.
Yeah, we're actually, you can't really become successful. You have to be successful and do what successful people do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's being uniquely yourself.
Yeah.
That's really embracing and loving yourself, and know you've got a tremendous amount of value to add and contribute to the world just for being yourself. And that's what all of these role models have shown me, is by being able to, I mean, if you want my best role model is Oprah Winfrey, and she and I grew up in South Georgia we're the same age, and we both grew up in South Georgia. And her obstacle, I mean, growing up in poor rural South Mississippi didn't look so good. And look what she's created.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what that obstacle, when she questioned that obstacle, look at the empire she's created, mostly to add value and contribute to the world and make the world a better, safer place, being a role model of being authentically and showing and contributing to the betterment of the world. And so that's it. Courtney wrote a pretty long piece. Let's see what she has to say, and we can comment on that. Hold on a second.
Absolutely.
She says, we beat imposter syndrome by surrendering to love. Yeah, not human love, but divine love, learning to understand and accept everyone and everything as part of us, to love and give with no expectation or want for anything in return. So I believe COVID is the perfect opportunity to learn to love and practice understanding, accepting everywhere is perfect and beautiful. The more we can love and the more we're happy. Love, acceptance, truth, God are all the same thing. I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think as I think about that comment, what it makes me think of was this concept, and she mentioned it in there, the love and the understanding and the acceptance part. For me, so in my opinion, that journey starts within first.
Always.
And that's choosing to accept myself, choosing to love myself, choosing to create opportunities to better understand myself. That's why this is something that I wanted to touch upon as well from what you said earlier. And that's this concept of having different conversations with people. And what it made me think of, however many years ago, I realized that each and every single one of the conversations actually is an opportunity for me to better understand not only the other person, but also myself. You know, in situations that appear to be quote unquote negative experiences. What is it about that situation that frustrates me, that brings me stress, that brings me discomfort? Those are all inner questions that I can ask myself. So I think Courtney is absolutely spot on with all of that. And the other thing that I'll mention is this. I remember when I first started to build Overcoming Odds, what really stood out to me and the approach that I took was that I wanted people who were a part of that community build the business themselves. And here's what I mean by that. Choosing to be open-minded to a degree where I understood that I don't have to figure out every component of this business model. And that is, if I choose to listen to other people, they will provide you the wording, the language, the structure in which they want to operate best. And so keeping an open mind, and something that Courtney had mentioned as well, and that's choosing to just fully be there as part of the process. I believe I've received all the answers that I needed, instead of me stepping into it and saying kind of my way or the highway, or this is the only way it could be built. And so I think especially in this time as well, with COVID-19 bringing in all these opportunities to pivot and change, what I'd like to pass on to people is that whatever you're seeking, don't box yourself into one particular perspective. You know, if it's building a business, if it's developing a product, let the people develop that for you. Because at least my experience has been, if you give it the opportunity, you will receive the language, the wording, the branding, whatever else that you're looking for. It's all about just tuning in to that frequency and allowing it to speak.
That is golden what you just said, because what you want to do is you want to in your develop. This is me. You have a concept. Okay, I want to be a coach. Then I have to turn around. And I have to say, oh, I don't know how. What am I going to coach? What am I going to teach? Well, if I turn around, like you say, and I listen to the people that I want, and I listen out there, they will tell me what they need to learn, and what they need from me. And then I can connect to them. That's a much more honest dimension. And you're so right, because then I listen to the universe. I listen to the voices of other people who, in my case, are struggling with imposter syndrome. They may not call it imposter syndrome, but I can hear in their story that they're stuck in this belief that whatever they're doing is not quite good enough. Or they're a fraud, or they're going to get found out about it, whatever those things are. And if I listen to that and hear it in their story, I'm like, oh, what they need is someone to guide them on the same journey that I took. Because I was there once myself. It's a miserable way to live, by the way. It's a freaking miserable way to live. And I know what that feels like. So I can go out and say, listen, I know what that feels like. And it's miserable. And this is what I did to get. I listened to it and I got out of it, and now and I turned it into my biggest ally, to my servant, and that's exactly. So I learned how from listening to the people that I need to coach. In my case, because I didn't know how to build a coaching business. I don't know how to build a coach. I'm just listening, like you say. I'm listening to I'm listening to the world and listening to what COVID-19 has to tell me, because when listening to what COVID-19 has, I'm listening to what the world is hungry for right now. And basically, I say the world, and why we're here today, is we're all hungry for connection with the divine within ourselves.
No, the thing that you point out about choosing to listen. So it took me a while to understand the difference between listening to respond and listening to understand. And I think there's a big difference between the two. And so in what you just mentioned in the story that you brought up, it made me think of the importance of listening to understand. And that's listening for the deeper meaning. I remember, I don't know how long ago this has been, but one of the things that I oftentimes used to receive as far as comments go from people was, how do you ask such deep questions? And for me, it just comes naturally, because I'm genuinely in the moment and trying to listen to the other person. You know, I don't sit here with a notepad and thinking, okay, what's the right word to use, or is this good enough? Because, and the reason why I think that happened is there was a time when I used to think of that. There was a time when I believed in this concept that there was such thing as a stupid question. And I remember in 9th grade, one of my teachers, her name is Judith DeWaskin, I was sitting in English class, and she stood up in the middle of class and she said, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And from that point forward, my perspective shifted completely. My perspective shifted to a degree where I understood that let's say for the sake of this conversation, but the only quote unquote stupid question is the one that's not asked. Every question has value. And every question, and as long as it's a question that you're seeking an answer to, who cares what anyone else wants to know?
Right.
So what that someone else may know how to build a quote unquote successful coaching business. As long as you're seeking that answer, that's the only point. That's the only reason why you're asking the question to begin with.
Right.
Is that you want to know the answer. Right. Not what the person next to you, to the left or to the right of you wants to know.
Yeah, I can't create a successful coaching practice the way my mentors do, the way my role model. I can't, because I can, but I can do it. I can see what they did, and I can follow their model.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you learn. And what they did was they learned to be authentic and question and do all the things where you and I are talking about right now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so you're spot on with that. I think that's a wonderful gift. And so tell us a little bit about what it is that you are doing right now in your, because I know you've got this business called Overcoming Odds.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us and the audience a little bit about the work that you're doing and how you're helping people overcoming we did briefly here, but specifically about how you work and what you're doing and what you're discovering in your business.
Yeah. So 3 years ago, when I chose to develop this particular organization, at the time, what it started off was a space for other adoptees and foster youth to be able to share their stories. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because I believe that's what I needed most at that time,
Right.
was a space to share my own story and space to share an experience that I was closest to. And so we started this space, and what it was initially was just a blog post through which other people were able to share their own experiences of what it was like to be adopted or go through the foster care system, kind of the good, the bad, and everything in between. And that's something that I wanted to do as well and highlight, and that is show as many different sides of that experience as possible, rather than only focusing on the quote unquote success stories or the stories that did not pan out. I wanted to showcase the entire thing and let people decide, especially for future adoptive and foster parents, what might be the best possible decision for them to make. What I realized over time, and this is where I think being open-minded really played a big role, was when I started to listen, I realized that a lot of the people that were coming into this space had nothing to do with adoption or foster care, but rather it was people who had just faced hardships in their lives. It was refugees, immigrants, members of the LGBTQ community. And so there were so many other dynamics and groups that were coming into this space where I realized that this is not only about adoption and foster care. And that is something actually a friend of mine had told me at the time, probably like 2 months prior.
They just put the hair on my skin, on my arm. I felt something with that.
But what this friend of mine told me, and it's funny because the article that you see in the background, there's actually a quote, that same exact quote that he said to me, and that is, what you're doing is so much more than adoption. At the time, I didn't really understand it. And I think the reason why I didn't understand it is because I was so fully ingrained into that process. And so I kept asking him the question, or I guess kept asking myself the internal question of, how could it be? Right? How could it be more than adoption when that's what I'm focusing on right now? Well, what I realized over time is that he was absolutely spot on, because the people he was attracting had, once again, nothing to do with adoption or foster care, but rather it was people who had just gone through hardships in their lives and were looking for a space to be heard and to be appreciated through their stories. And that's where I realized the importance of creating a space like that, where I can genuinely hear another person's perspective and give them an opportunity to be heard. Because here's the thing, and we started off this conversation with the same exact line. In my opinion, so much of the world, at least for me, that I live in, it doesn't have those opportunities where I can openly share the different things that I'm going through. When you go to a Starbucks, when you go to a grocery store, even though you might get asked a question of, how's your day going? What I realized is that those economies are so fast paced, where by the time you answer the things that are actually going on in your day, that question is being asked to the next person in line, and then the person behind them, and then the person behind that person. So that's where I got curious as far as, is it even genuine listening at that point? You know, I understand in business we try and be authentic and as welcoming as we can. But if we're just asking questions for the sake of asking questions, what's the point? Why say anything, period? Right? If there's no intention behind it. So that's what I wanted to do with that space. The work has evolved quite a bit. I know that with COVID, one of the things we had to transition to is having virtual events now, where they used to be in person. And so those are just similar experiences to what you and I are going through right now. Just creating a space for other people to share the different things that they're going through, to confront whatever the fears, whatever the imposter syndrome may be. And then from there, better understand that they're not alone. There's someone else along that journey that's traveling a similar path, just a different set of circumstances and a different set of events. That's it.
We're all here together.
Yeah.
And we're not meant to make it alone. We're here to love. We do it through love and support and compassion.
Always have been and always will be.
And by sharing our stories. I mean, since the beginning of time, men and women have sat in circles and shared stories to move ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I don't care whether technology comes, whether we're sitting around a Zoom camera or we're sitting around a campfire, we're still back to the basic need to share our stories and support and love one another through to the next step, and to the next step, and to the next step, and to the next step.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a pretty good place to be. If somebody wanted to find you, how would they find you? I'm going to type it into the chat.
I think the best way that people can find me is through our website, and that is overcomingodds.today. And then beyond that could be any other form of social media. And that's simply typing in Overcoming Odds or my name to begin with. I think it's the joke that I make is that it's probably one of the more common, it's the most common American name you'll come across, Oleg Lougheed. So it shouldn't be that hard to find. But yeah, you bring up a very good point of the fact that
Lockheed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll just put that right here. I'm just going to put your name there because I think if people Google your name is unique as it is, they'll find all paths lead to you. I believe
Mm-hmm.
that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And because I can imagine that there might be a number of people who are struggling with odds and struggling with different things right now. It could be including things like foster care and adoption and the things that are specific to you in your life as well. So that would be a good help for you. So now we're going to, unless anybody else has anything they want to comment or want to talk about, I'll give it a second or two. We will create some heart space and we'll do a little meditation. And as much as I want to say what I usually say is that as much as I appreciate you coming to hear what I've got to say and my guests have to say, and open your hearts to hearing some what I might call some spiritual truth or wisdom from my own life experiences. It's more important to get still and listen to that real voice within you, your unique voice, your divine presence, and because that's where your power is. And our intention here is to begin to help sort of reprogram the pathways in your head to be more receptive to getting still.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just saying that what we're going to do is we're going to go through some meditation, but don't run. People, I can look at the numbers and I can see people just all of a sudden, as soon as we start the meditation, they sort of flee. And I really want to encourage you, as flattering as I am, and it's my birthday, by the way. I'm 66 years old today.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. And as my birthday present, would you do this for me, people who are out in the audience? Would you, let's see what Rohit has to say here. Thank you, Oleg, to share in some of the learnings. Very nice to meet you here and looking forward to follow your work. Yeah, you guys should meet each other. I think you've got some your stories. I'll briefly tell you, I picked, I don't think Rohit minds me telling you this, but I'm a part of something called First Friends, and we pick up, when people come from out of the country in India, they get picked up at the detention centers by ISIS, and they get locked up. And then when they finally get their petition and they get released, they just get released in the middle of an industrial complex in Newark with nothing, no phone, nothing. So I'm a part of an organization that called First Friends. And what we do is if someone's getting released, we volunteer to go pick them up and give them a place to stay and take care of them until they can get to their family. And Rohit, I'm going to get a little emotional. Rohit was the first person I ever picked up. And he ended up staying with us for about a week or so. And we become very dear friends. And I think he's now on the board of directors for First Friends. And he lives in New York, and he's just a beautiful, beautiful human being, talking about overcoming obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
And so
what made you get into that?
What made me get in? It was just it was an invitation, and I thought, well, I can do that. I could pick up somebody. I live not far from there. I can easily pick somebody up and give them a ride. And I got a house. I can give them a place to spend the night. And
Mm,
I'm so glad I did. And that's how we met. That's how we became friends.
that's incredible. What a journey.
Yeah, it's all good. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited he's here, and he's just a beautiful human being. So back to meditation again, and that is that in contemplative prayer. I do a form of contemplative prayer. It's called centering prayer, and there's an intention here. There's an intention in the type of contemplative prayer, and it is to tap into our power.
Mm-hmm.
It is to tap into that infinite power within us, that creative power that we all have within us, that dimension, so that we can begin to live from that place. We can live from prosperity. We can live from success. That's the biggest power in the universe, because the power we have within us, the power that created everything that you see. And you might hear about it from you and I, but you're going to be more powerful when you hear it for yourself and you create that relationship. And
Mm,
that's what contemplative prayer is. It's a process of, one, getting still, letting go of your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions that you're attached to, over and over and over again, and listening. There's that word listening again, right?
mm-hmm.
In real world, it's like getting still, letting go of the imposter syndrome and all this nonsense, and listening for the truth. That's what it is. And we do it over and over, and we just dedicate 20 minutes of practice to doing that. And what you'll discover, the more you do it, the more presence will show up. It will show up in the moment, in the spaces, and the beauty of that is you begin. For me, it's become a more of like, I live more with presence than I live without it. So, and that's a powerful, exciting way to live,
Mm-hmm.
allowing presence to live through us. So please, I want to guide us in, and then we're going to just sit and be still. You'll hear an interval bell every 3 times during the meditation, and the reason we do that is to wake us up from a trance. Because sometimes we think we're meditating, but we've caught onto some thought we think is so fantastic, and
Mm-hmm.
we followed it into a hole. And these bells wake us up and say, "Oh," and we can reset. Because as good as the thought might be, this is not for that. That can be later. Take the thought and put it on the side and say, okay, we're going to work that out later.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, we want to get deeper and deeper within ourselves and listen more deeply. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So let me set the bell, and we will meditate. Okay. So we start by raising your arms in the air. And the reason I want you to raise your arms, I want you just to get still with your hands up and feel the presence of the divine, of life in your fingers, in your arms. That's what did this. That's what's holding you up. You may have the biggest muscles in the world, but if you don't have that spark of life in you, they're not going anywhere. And that's just how close the divine is. You are the divine when you allow it to become conscious in our bodies. And that's what it means to embody the spirit. So you can put your arms down now and just get comfortable and begin to focus on your breath. We're going to do a little mindful breathing. And just notice the breath coming up into your nostrils, be going up into your head, down your throat, into your lungs and into your heart, mixing with your blood. Spirit becoming matter. Spirit becoming form in you, in the heart. And allow your heart to expand and open and be receptive to give and receive love. And in particular, right now, I'm going to invite you to open your heart a little further and invite into it any thoughts, any beliefs, any opinions, any judgments, any stories you might have right now. Just let them go. Surrender them to the heart and allow your heart to just welcome them and hold them, all like precious children, without judgment. Let go of any beliefs you have about yourself and about me and about God and about COVID-19. Hold on to nothing. And allow yourself to fall more deeply into the cloud of unknowing. We don't know. And love and embrace the unknown. Allow the divine within you, the divine mother, to hold and nurture you for the next few minutes. Let go of all control you think you have over the universe and be still. And if thoughts come up, as they will, because that's what thoughts do, you can't control your thoughts any more than you can control the clouds in the sky. Just let them come up, welcome them, and let them go. Let them come up, welcome them, and let them go.
Yeah, it could be a select group. I'm pretty ingenious today, Tom. Yes, it is. I'm not surprised that this was.
Alright, nice. Arthur, make sure to sit in the middle, okay, if anything helps, Arthur? Alright, sorry about that. Everyone buckled?
Hello and welcome back. It's amazing how quickly that 20 minutes goes by. And it's also amazing to me how many things come up in my head. I get a lot of practice in dropping and letting go.
Mhm.
But the good thing is that I get a lot of good ideas that come up in my head during these meditations, And so I'm grateful for that.
It's also amazing, I think, something that you even started off with by saying how there's always going to be things that you don't know. And so letting go of those things and, halfway through the person's alarm going and there's just so many, you can't control those circumstances
Right.
or
Right.
any of the circumstances.
None of them. As I often say to people, is that meditation is about quieting the mind so you can hear the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about I want to sit in silence. I can't hear the world. So it was amazing to me to hear my neighbors were right outside my window and they were taking their kids somewhere and all of a sudden they hit something, the alarm went off and it was like, and it just tickled me because it's like there's life happening. I could get all excited, but it was like kind of joyful to hear the sounds of people living around me.
You know what it made me think of was there was a movie I watched a while ago. I think it's just forgot the name. It's something like "We Are Your Friends" or something like that. But anyways, there's a scene in that movie, and this particular case reminded me of it directly. And that is one of the characters in the film. He's a DJ, and so every morning he goes out for a run, and I guess before this one time, he would look at some of the other things for inspiration, like other musicians and other artists. And then he was having a conversation with another person who had said, you need to look for inspiration elsewhere. You just need to be you. And so one morning when he went out on the jog, he just started listening to the world. He would listen to a car drive by and then one that went a little bit slower. And that gave him a little bit of inspiration for a type of track or a sound beat. And then he heard the chimes outside someone else's door. And then just like the wind blowing. And then he went out by some of the electric poles and was able to hear, electricity passing through it or feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it made me think of the same exact thing about, I think, how far too often when it comes to meditation, I think there's a misconception, and that is you have to be in a, locked away basement where you don't hear the world. But in reality, it is through hearing some of these sounds, natural sounds of the world. That's where I think you get the ideas and inspirations from. I mean, who knows what the car alarm made you think of and what it's going to inspire. Or for me, it was hearing a conversation. I actually have neighbors that not next door, but I think they were on the street because I even heard them. So right now we're experiencing a lot of rain. So I heard them stepping into the puddles. So there's a lot to be said between that.
I'm not hearing you. Something happened to our systems here. I don't know what that is. Let me check and see. Mike's.
Can you hear me
now? Mine's working.
Mine should be working.
I'm not hearing you.
No? It work now?
No.
No?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Well, maybe that's the universe telling us something we need to shut up. So we're going to sign out. It is at 1 o'clock and we go from 12 to 1 and we're going to sign out. And this has been a joy. And I hope you'll come back and join me again sometime.
Awesome.
Thank you. Were able to hear Oleg as well. That's interesting.
Yeah, maybe it's
really
it's only on your end, Martin.
He can hear you, but I can't hear you.
Huh.
Hold on a second. Let me see if there's something here. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not very technically savvy, but they can hear you. But it is 1 o'clock. So I hope you'll come back again when the sound's working for everybody. Mm-hmm. And it's been a delight having you on here with me today. And I look forward to having you come back.
Absolutely.
And Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And may love and prosperity prevail. Thank you.